Hey folks. So last week, or the last couple weeks, we have been exploring traditional instructional design as a field, as an approach to designing learning experiences. And we have been taking a look at what we need to step away from as we are looking to design learning experiences that are more pedagogically powered than maybe we've designed before. Or rather, we are looking to create or build this design approach that is pedagogically powered. And in doing that, we do have to leave behind some of those militaristic, corporate um, influences on traditional instructional design. But that means that we are left with not a lot to work with that isn't very systems based, that isn't very rigid, and that tries to pretend that learning is this kind of structured, logical phenomenon that happens and looks the same for everybody. So, where can we look for design inspiration as we are thinking about design approaches that actually uphold our values as teachers? And when Martha and I were planning this topic, we spent a lot of time really figuring out how we wanted it to look. And it does look very different than many of our topics in Design Forward. And that's because not a lot of people are researching, writing, um, creating scholarship around this idea. So that means we are forging our own paths forward. And what that means is that Martha and I have really just put our heads together as designers, as as learning designers, as graphic designers, as project managers, and we have really tried to put together a menu, I suppose, of resources where we could possibly look for design inspiration with the understanding that because we are encouraging um, the creation of this design approach that is pedagogically powered and powered by values, that everybody's design approach is going to look a little bit different. And so we wanted to provide a huge menu of things that people could explore. So for the purposes of these slides, I've chosen my favorites. And this starts with the Universal Design for Learning approach to instructional design. It's also called UDL. UDL is a fantastic framework because it puts learners at the center and it approaches design with the understanding that barriers are within the learning environment and not because of any um, fault of the learner. And so I really enjoy this quote from um, uh, Access8, which works in collaboration with CAST, who created UDL. And they said developing a UDL mindset does not mean changing content or decreasing rigor. Instead, it means designing learning experiences, curriculums, and materials that are accessible to all. It starts with the core belief that the barrier is in the environment, not the learner. To reduce the barriers and ensure educators are designing for all learners, attention should shift from the student to the curriculum and design of learning. And there are some core principles of UDL. It is process based, it is very much human centered, it focuses on accessibility and inclusive design. And really focuses on and emphasizes multiple means of engagement, representation, and action and expression in learning. And there is this focus on supporting executive functioning in students. And this framework also provides just so many concrete design considerations for educators that really kind of focus around access and accessibility, and is just a fantastic resource for us as we are considering the design of learning that puts students at the forefront and that honors all of our students for their differences. Another learning or instructional design approach that we've talked about in the collab, especially with TWP and INCAP, and this is design thinking. And one of my favorite things about design thinking is this bias towards action. I'll read this quote. This is the heart of design thinking. You are committed to build your way forward. Designers test out ideas, failing often. Designers embrace change. They are not attached to one particular outcome, especially when there are times that the problem is entirely different from what they initially thought it was. They focus on what will happen next rather than what the final result will be. So, in particular, in project based classes, design thinking is a fantastic way to structure projects and help students understand that many times when you dive into a project, you don't understand what work has to be done in order to achieve your goals. And so, through the work of the project, those goals can change. And your understanding of the actual problem can change as well. So the bias towards action is saying no matter what changes, no matter if you have to pivot or something fails, the most important thing is that you go back, you continue to prototype and test and try again. And so these are kind of what the design thinking framework looks like. It consists of iterative stages: empathize, define, ideate, prototype, and test. And the focus is really on understanding the problem that you are working with, especially how it impacts or affects the humans that are impacted by that particular problem. So I love this as a way to design project-based classes in particular, because that empathize stage really puts the emphasis on the humans that are impacted by this particular project. And so we're kind of shifting a little bit, and this is a quote from me, which seemed like cheating as I wrote it out. But again, people really aren't talking about how we can borrow things from project management, from graphic design, etc., in the creation of instructional design approaches that are flexible, and that make room for students being creative and pivoting and emergent learning. But in my work in the collab, where I've kind of become a project manager, because we do a lot of programs, a lot of projects, and it just became necessary for me to learn how to actually operationalize labor. So I'll read this. My work in the collab has involved a lot of project management, and it's made me a better learning designer and facilitator. On the one hand, so many PM strategies and frameworks commit the same sins that traditional instructional design commit. They're often focused on efficiency, increasing the bottom line, technology, systems rather than people. However, at the end of the day, we are talking about academic labor that needs to be done. The benefit of PM then is that it enables the operationalizing of labor. And so in particular, I utilize PM strategies in my instructional design to protect my energy and labor and provide support and scaffolding for students to approach open-ended academic work with focus and intention. So let me show you what this looks like a little bit in practice. And again, we've provided a bunch of resources around project management so you can see for yourself what things can be borrowed from these approaches. And maybe you don't like any of the project management strategies, and that is perfectly fine. We've provided a lot of different areas for you to look for inspiration. But let me talk through just a couple of these project management approaches. So systems thinking, this is really popular in software development. And the main principle of systems thinking that I personally borrow from my own project management or from my own instructional design is that structures are inescapable, and we can't work outside of structures. So we need to understand structures and understand what needs to change within structures and how we can use structures and systems to benefit us. And I think about this in particular in the grading and the term schedule and providing midterm grades and taking attendance, those sorts of things. They are inescapable structures. They're inescapable systems in our instructional design that we have to work with around, and perhaps that it is necessary for us to look at and change if they are no longer serving us. And I also really like this as a way to help students understand problems or projects, or just work in general. How can we use systems and logic, and those structures that maybe hold us a little bit in a cage, but also hold us together? How we can make those work for us. Now, emergent strategy is a really big umbrella term for a strategy in project management that understands that things are going to happen throughout the process of the project that you had no idea about at the beginning. And emergent strategy is all about accepting the things that happen in the periphery and adjusting your goals for those things that come about that are unexpected but promising. And in particular, like here in the periphery, we can uncover unexpected opportunities for growth or success, pivoting as the expectation, not an inconvenience. And I think back to my own teaching, and in particular in TWP and NCAP, and I'm going to talk about project-based learning a lot, because we're talking about PM. Wow, every thought just went out of my brain. Project management. So, of course, projects are on my mind. But how many times have we helped students or facilitated students projects, and they've discovered halfway through that they need to completely pivot, that their original goal is not reachable, not attainable, and how to deal with that setback. And emergent strategy tells us to actually change the way that we think about these pivoting moments, not as setbacks but as opportunities. Critical path method, that's again a very formulaic, or that's another very formulaic project management strategy, and you can dive into the research or into the resource on that if you'd like. But it's actually my favorite one, maybe because my brain works a little bit like how the critical path method works. But the critical path method encourages project managers to identify the priorities in the project and those critical activities of the project that have to happen in order for the project to succeed. And especially in my work in operationalizing my academic labor, it's very important for me to prioritize, because I can get a little bit too far into the weeds and can really focus on lots of minutia that actually doesn't have anything to do with the finishing of the project. It's just based on my own desires for perfectionism. And I feel the critical path method could also help students understand and operationalize their own academic labor and those activities that are important to the success of their projects, of their writing, of their research, anything like that. And then the last one I'm going to talk about is oblique strategies. This is a really fun one that came from the field of music. And these are a series of cards that really just encourage you to look at a problem from another perspective. So very much inspired by lateral thinking, that idea, the very cliched think outside the box. You can look at problems from multiple angles and try new things to get out of creative ruts, or to just encourage pivoting in an emergent approach to a project or work. And the purpose of those cards is not to promise any answers or a logical way to think about these things, but they invoke new and unexpected possibilities. Finally, I have this wonderful quote from a resource that we have about mutual aid groups that I really enjoy. I'm just going to direct your attention as you think about these things to this particular quote and the end. Instead of relying on paychecks or urgency to move the work forward, well-structured mutual aid groups consider what intrinsically motivates volunteers to stay engaged, what makes someone want to keep showing up. And I love this just as a way to remind us to think about our students and what is motivating to them and check in with them on that. And maybe our design approach needs to include that as a particular step, that intrinsic motivation. All right, thanks.